This is From Destruction to Dignity with Janice Pons. Each week, Janice shares her wisdom to enlighten, educate, and advance the culture in America today. Janice Pons is a mother, author, and free thinker, and your host for our podcast this evening. Now let's join your host, Janice Pons.
Greetings, greetings, greetings. Come on in. Come on in the house. Welcome home. I am so glad you're here. You know I'm excited. It doesn't take a lot to excite me. You know why? Because people are getting it. One of these shows I'm going to just give some testimonies. Amazing things are happening when what? People are having their thoughts provoked, they're becoming aware, and they're pursuing intervention. Very powerful. Well, I need to do that. We'll get to that because we're excited and talking about thoughts being provoked and becoming aware. We need to dive in. So, hey, let me tell you who I am. My name is Janice Pons. I am your host on this show, this podcast, From Destruction to Dignity, Clinical Perspective, Spiritual Truths. And we talk about everything from A to Z. Why? Because there's a lot to talk about from A to Z. And we want everyone to be empowered. And there's a group of people that have really a special place in my heart. Because guess what? I am one of those people. I am a parent. And parents get challenged, and parents, they want to do well, but sometimes parents don't know what to do. So because of that, because of whatever it is, whatever cards were dealt to them as parents, and usually it was dealt to them as a child going into adolescence, and now, they got children now. Even sometimes 12 and 13-year-olds are parents. And so they can get set up to be abusive. So tonight we're going to dive in. We're going to talk about a group of people that we want them to get it. We want them to be well. We want this pattern of destruction that can go on. We want it stopped. We want an intervention to happen. We want things to be turned around. Tonight we're going to deal with emotionally abusive parents. Emotionally abusive parents. Of course, this is fair use. There's so much information out there related to emotional abuse and about parenting. And this is a dynamic that is really dear to my heart because this is all about education, right? But professionally, I've seen a lot. I've worked on children's inpatient psychiatric units. I've worked with substance abuse treatment programs, started and run programs, every level of care. I've seen parents that were under just severe stress. I've seen the children who had abusive parents, and because the parents were so extremely abusive, it set them up to become addicted to sit by just to cope based on what they were subjected to. So listen, we want our parents to be successful. I have some of the most amazing before and after stories with parents that I could ever desire to articulate. But I'm telling you what, they had to come to a point of realizing they needed to do something different. And as a result of a part of that was them realizing, what am I doing that I need to give attention to? Emotionally abusive parents. What is emotional abuse? Emotionally abusive parents, they leave scars. Scars that last a lifetime. Invisible scars that can last someone's entire life. And emotional abuse is it puts a psychological pressure. Our minds, the psychological makeup of all of us has to do with our minds, our emotions, our intellect, our drives, our desires, our will, our souls. So when you bring in the emotional abuse from a parent, some people have a hard time even seeing God as a loving father. Are you kidding me? I've been told. How can they see God as a loving father when their father may have been so incredibly emotionally abusive? So emotional abuse is a psychological pressure a solical pressure that's used on children to sometimes get them to do what you want them to do as a parent. Oh my God, there's so many other ways. So, I've seen parents that think it's okay to isolate their children, a 2 or 3-year-old, in a room for hours at a time while they're screaming at the tops of their lungs. Humiliation, intimidation. That's some examples of abusing a child. But abusing a child mentally by doing things like calling them names, cussing them out, inflicting severe punishments. I once knew someone, God, Lord, when that person told me this, they were talking about how their mother would beat them to the point that there was blood and then douse them down with alcohol. That's severe emotional abuse. Constantly picking at your child, making them feel worthless, actually neglecting them, actually ignoring them, telling them, sit down over there and be quiet, shut up. And they may be appropriately trying to get their parents' attention. So, how does that affect their soul? How does that affect a child's mind when their minds are growing and they have a ever growing and changing process in their personalities? Their personalities are they're gelling, they're molding. And this, I've talked a lot about narcissism. I've talked about gaslighting. These things happen. These things develop as a result of children often being exposed to this kind of thing. And this is how they're raised. And it's like, well, how did that happen? Why are they so hard? What? A lot of times they were taught. That's what they saw. And sometimes you go back and look at those other podcasts, Breaking Free from a Narcissist, self-sabotaging behavior. A lot of that is old patterns of survival that get embedded into one's personality, their psyche, and it'll when they get back in a corner or get under stress or feel threatened, just watch what comes out. Watch what comes out of their mouth, and their nonverbal communication will change on you. It's just there. A lot of it's not their fault. It wasn't their fault as a child, but this is what they were exposed to. So, what are some? Let's dissect this personality thing. How this gets in there with our emotional abuse. Examples of emotional abuse with parents undermining a child's success or achievement. Can't even give them a attaboy. Undermining them. Couldn't you do better than that? Shoot, I can't. Undermining it. Frequent criticism, frequent humiliation, frequent shaming. Do you shame your child? Do you see others shame their children? Belittling a child by comparing them with others. The inability to see them separately as they are and their effort. Calling them demeaning names, cussing children out, just cussing them out. That's a way of communication with children. Calling them good for nothing, you lousy thing, you loser. Why would a grown person get up and call people losers? You losers? Why? What's the point? Maybe that's what they saw growing up. Scolding children. If that pattern's not broken, you'll end up scolding adults. threatening them with dire consequences if they fail to do something, exposing them to firsthand or secondhand violence. Oh my God. I've seen children exposed to some of the most horrendous, violent situations. I worked as a therapist many years ago. This I got my teeth. I cut my teeth on an inpatient psychiatric unit for children that were as young as 3 and 4 years old that had been exposed to such horrendous abuse that they had to be hospitalized. They taught me a lot. Do you know that even when you refrain from physical contact such as appropriate hugging, appropriate kissing, appropriate affection, that's abuse? Neglect, not holding your child properly into you, holding your child, hugging your child, affirming your child. You might say, well, I didn't get it. No. So I wonder if we can learn to do something different and what might be the outcome. Because I'm telling you, that is that's a root dynamic of sometimes why these girls and these children are seeking out affection, affection, affection. Do you know, I'm going to say this. The Holy Spirit showed me this. And he showed me this. He said, do you know that I design boys to desire appropriate male attention, appropriate male affection? Boys from a male. Guess who they're supposed to get it from? You all know the answer, right? Daddy. He said to me, he said, Janice, because I was dealing with a lot of dynamics with folk. And I said, God, I want to understand the minds now. I'm not here to change them. We're going to go through a process and, they can, where they are is where they are. And then he said, I design girls to desire appropriate female attention, to be held by another female. He said, and you know where they're supposed to get it from? And of course I knew the answer. Their mama. Supposed to get it from mama. How many girls aren't getting that? How many boys aren't getting that? How many of them are going through all those things that the aforementioned characteristics and examples that I gave? And you know what God told me? Yeah, he talks to me. We talk all the time. I need him to talk to me so I'll know what to do with people, help them out. He said, do you know that the enemy knows that they've been deprived of that appropriate female and male attention? I was like, yes, Lord. And he said, do you know that he will accommodate them and he will orchestrate it so that some older person that wants to give them inappropriate attention will come across their path, that they don't even understand boundaries. They won't even understand when their boundaries are being violated, and these people will perpetrate this physical attention on them. I met little girls that were 10, 11, and 12 years old who had experienced orgasms in their little bodies, and they're trying to make sense out of it. And they're all confused. They're just way out there, trying to make sense of this stuff. Their bodies, they're not supposed to be experiencing an orgasm in their body at the age of 10, 11, 12. But an older person came across your track and gave him that kind of attention. Who they're supposed to be getting appropriate attention from? There are parents that can blame their children for anything that goes wrong. It's your fault. Y'all driving me crazy. Okay, there we go. Pushing them too hard to achieve forcefully imposed aims and targets. Sometimes people, they're living out their own failures through their children. Ignoring them and their needs, just not even asking them, baby, what is it that you need? What do you want? Asking them, what do they need? Not appreciating their effort or their hard work. Listen, honey, my son, I made the biggest deal out of his achievements. He has a great self-esteem, but I was very intentional with things that I did. So, what are some common signs that alerts us that, We might need to take a closer look at that. Adults that are moody, cussing, hollering. Oh, it's not normal. Moody, cussing, hollering. The child have to walk on eggshells to be around them. Adults that blame children for their problems, the adults' problems, they blame it on the children. So let's say an adult doesn't get a promotion at work, and they'll blame the child for being a distraction. And they'll say, "You kids are driving me crazy." How do you think that affects the child and how they think? Abusive parents rarely accept responsibility for their shortcomings. That is a pattern. That is a pattern. That is a pattern. And it's so damaging. I'm telling you, let's stop right there. One of the most powerful things that I ever did with my son, and I've talked to many parents about this, one of the most powerful things that you can ever do is to go to your child and apologize when you miss it. Do you realize what kind of breakthroughs happen or can potentially happen when you do that? I've been in family sessions and seen the most powerful breakthrough points right there. Whoa. And I just pull back and let that thing unfold. This is why the therapeutic process is so powerful. And God will meet people front and center in that process. Another sign or an alert that we need to be aware of, they treat necessities as privileges. They have to necessarily eat. They have to necessarily have clothes. But so we're going to relegate that. I mean, they can earn some things, but it's like, wait a minute. How are we categorizing these things? Food, clothing. When they are presented as an enormous favor bestowed upon a child, I'm doing you a favor. Talking about things to be aware of. Destructive criticism. Criticism, man. Just criticizing. The old folks call it browbeating, just browbeating children. Constructive criticism is essential for growth and development, where you learn and you help them to connect the dots and you process it and you empower them and you talk about observable, measurable changes so they can go back and evaluate it and process it, and they have a baseline to start from, that this is what they were working from, and they can look back and say, wow, yeah, that's where I started. Look at where I'm at now. And you make a big deal out of it. You know why? Because it is a big deal. But when you use certain things as a weapon to destroy a child's confidence and their self-worth, destructive pattern. These are destructive patterns that absolutely destroy a child's soul. Even if the child performs well in an activity, they highlight the smallest error. What's the point? Highlighting the smallest error and overlook the fact that they did well. What's going on? What's going on with those kind of dynamics? Abusive parents, they tend not to value the emotions of their children. You know what? They don't even value their own emotions. Sometimes we don't even have an emotional vocabulary. I've worked with people individually. It's like, okay, we're going to do this group on emotional vocabulary. Here's a list. Here are emotions. They've never used them. They've never identified them. Sometimes you have to start as basic as sad, happy, angry, frustrated. They don't put a language to it. The therapeutic process is about learning to put a language to something. Sometimes mentioning an embarrassing habit of their child to their friends. What's the point? Or the child becomes irritated and begins to sulk. They dismiss it. A parent can dismiss that as being, you're just being overly sensitive. Why you being so over there? Bulk up, boy. Bulk up right now. Where's that going? Making fun out of a child. Saying they're weak. Saying it in front of people. Comparing their children with other children. It might not, I mean, what's that all about? Comparing them to others, their siblings, to their other acquaintances. What's that about? That there's a need to compare them, teasing them, calling them names, cussing them out. Scaredy cat, you always, you never. All inclusive words, you always and you never, you always and you never. Abusive parents, they don't think twice about bullying, teasing, using sarcasm to make the child an object of ridicule. Can you imagine growing up like that? I've dealt with children, it was so horrendous, they ended up hospitalized. They were trying to commit suicide at 7 and 8 years old. Remember, we did a show last year in 2022 that from 2000 to 2020, the suicide rate for children between the ages of 10 and 12 quadrupled. Sometimes parents can be passive aggressive. Who they're really upset with, who they're really frustrated with, they're passive at that. They shut down, they don't say anything, but they take it out aggressively on their children. Passive aggressive. How does that affect children? An emotionally abusive parent acts as though everything is fine. They can be relaxed, but they will refuse to help or guide their children when they need it or seek it. Oh my God, there were some times I was so tired. I've always been a hard worker. I'm not patting myself on the back. I just always been a hard worker. Had to be. Sometimes had to be twice as good because of just how things were. But let me tell you what, when I got home from work, my son got he had my undivided attention. We drilled the spelling words. We went through the extra things to empower him to have support. There was no neglect. But a lot of times, emotionally abusive parents, they neglect their children. Why? They were neglected. They haven't learned. See, we can learn. The deal is we can learn these things. There's hope. We can go from these destructive patterns to dignity, to why? Pass it on to our children. Because the way you're raised, a lot of times that's how you're going to raise your children. Listen, it's difficult. It's challenging. But as we learn to be intentional, things can turn around. A lot of times, God, people are so preoccupied today, so incredibly distracted. And sometimes we can lose focus of what's really important. I tell young people that young adults that have children, I said, listen, baby, basically you got 18 years to pour into your child a strong foundation. After that, they're kind of on their own. They're on their own. And hopefully, you've built a relationship to the point that it continues, where they will have that solid, awesome relationship with you. But that doesn't happen by chance. Guilt tripping children too often. What's that about? Is that building that healthy relationship where they're being emotionally abused? I gave up so much for you, and if it wasn't for you, I would have finished my degree. But I gave up this, that, and the other. Why? So I could just, I had to do what I had to do. How's that affecting your children? Listen, sometimes parents are physically present. They're there physically, but emotionally, they're absent. They're absent. You know how that manifests? They don't interact with your child, and they're not available for them emotionally. My son is a grown man, and I know him. He wants my undivided attention. He wants it. And I got a lot of irons in the fire. A lot of irons. So many wonderful things are happening with me in 2023. But I still give him, okay, put that down. Put the phone down, Janice. Put whatever down and give him my undivided attention. We have an amazing relationship. Children are often used as a commodity against a former spouse. You all know that goes on. Wow. We really need to be aware of how abusive that can become, where the child is being used to control another spouse, and they're caught in the middle, the cussing and the hollering. All of these things affect self-esteem. They affect the emotions, the developmental growth and the developmental process. And a lot of times they're just not going to adjust properly, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. We want our children to be successful. When I was a teacher and a school psychologist, I was so incredibly intentional. There's a way to create environments that are so conducive for change. Are we doing that for our homes? I did that in classrooms. My classroom, it was stellar, but I intentionally created an environment that's what Janice did, and that was the expectation that I had. And I do it in treatment facilities as well. This is how we do it here. We don't cuss, we don't fight, we do therapy, we do care, we do respect, we do love, we process. It's all in intentionality. So, what's the expectation? What's the environment that's being created in the home? And then as teenagers, they grow up, and if we set it up the right way, that healthy environment's going to be there, and you have built an awesome relationship. And then you go into adulthood, and amazingly, you have the most outstanding relationship with your children. So how do we deal with this? We want to turn this thing around. We want to turn it around. Identify the pattern of abuse. Recognize the problematic attitude. And some of you, bottom line, you need to go to therapy. I am probably every show I have, I'm going to talk about the therapeutic process, because I've seen the Holy Spirit show up front and center in these therapeutic processes, and people weep, cry, they get revelation, they get delivered. Why? Because of a structured setting where they finally go there. But recognizing the need to go there, looking at these attitudes, looking at these environments, learning how to set boundaries, changing your reaction to a response. How do you respond to your children instead of reacting? Think about it. There's a difference, and pursuing what that's going to be about. Remember, listen, what happened to you wasn't your fault as a child, but you know what? We can talk about changing some things now, because we could go on and on and on learning how to talk and build relationships. Stop cussing at your children. I was in Walmart. This lady was cussing her little boy out because he was coughing. Lord Jesus, help us. Father, right now I pray for parents everywhere. I pray in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ that they will be provoked in their thoughts, that they become aware and they seek help, that they realize these destructive patterns do not have to continue to go on, that they will pursue the therapeutic process. There are so many support groups. There's so much for them. And I pray for all the parents that will hear this and they will decide, I'm going to do something different. Listen, go to my website, janicepons.com. You may pursue a therapeutic process. God is waiting to meet you front and center as a parent. Good night.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of From Destruction to Dignity with Janice Pons. Janice's mission is to provoke thought, bring awareness, and point people towards intervention when needed. As a reminder, this show is not therapy, but for educational purposes only. For more information, check out JanicePons.com or follow her on social media. Education, affirmation, dedication, information.